I'm Harrison Graham. Welcome into Verts and Chat Sports, as this video is going on both channels. I'm diving into the latest on Penn State's head coaching search, the latest rumors, the buzz, which candidates could be in the mix, as Penn State is got to, kind of start to zero in on a few guys as you get into December soon, with recruiting heating up, transfer portal opening early January, so on and so forth. We'll dive into the latest here, but if you want to support one or both of these channels, I host Verts, which is an NFL and college football show we launched last year, on the pace for 15,000 subscribers. Then, of course, our main Chat Sports YouTube channel, which is all sports, NFL, college football, NBA, some baseball, other content here and there as well. Almost at 423,000 subscribers. Support us all here at Chat Sports. Hit that subscribe button wherever you're watching. It's 100% free. Okay, Kalen DeBoer. There's been some deep rumors that maybe, just maybe, Penn State could get the Alabama head coach to leave the South, go up to Penn State. There's been some chatter. Maybe he's just not a perfect fit for Bama and for the SEC as a whole. John Sauber, who covers Penn State for the Century Daily Times, wrote this. He says, DeBoer is the other candidate at the top of the list. He also talked about Brent Key, who we'll get to in a little bit, and is still the program's primary target. If they lose to Auburn to close out the season, likely guaranteeing they miss the playoff, the tension will be high in Tuscaloosa. He's not a great fit at the program already, and not making the CFP in his first two seasons will have the fan base and, more importantly, donors on edge. Well, number one, let me just say this. I absolutely can buy that Penn State would want Kalen DeBoer. What he did at Washington was fantastic. I think he's had tough shoes to fill at Alabama with Nick Saban leaving. They don't have the NIL as a Texas A&M, as an Ohio State, as an Oregon. Don't get me wrong, it's a great job, but you're filling legendary shoes. And yeah, like if they were to miss the playoff again, that would cause some noise down in Tuscaloosa. Some fans wanted him fired after year one. They definitely wanted him fired after Florida State. Then they rallied 8 in a row, but then they lost to Oklahoma. So big pressure cooker game coming up against their rival in Auburn. Now, Paul Finebaum completely dismissed this. He said that I have never heard 1 ounce of concrete information that indicates Kalen DeBoer is going anywhere. I saw Chris Lowe. Some others have dismissed these rumors as well. So I don't think there's a ton of legs here, but I will go back to what Sauber said. What if Alabama loses to Auburn? You think Crimson Tide fans are going to accept 2 years of no college football playoff appearance in a 12-team playoff? This isn't the 4-team era. This is 12 teams. Alabama expects to be in the college football playoff every single year. On a 5-year sample size, you should be making it at least 4 times. Like that's just going to be the standard. And so if you're not doing that, if you're Kalen DeBoer, whether it's completely his fault or not, maybe, just maybe, it would make sense for him to go to a Penn State, which, by the way, would be an absolute home run hire for Penn State. I mean, if you get Kalen DeBoer, you should be, celebrating outside of Beaver Stadium for the next, 9 months until the college football season rolls around. Again, I do think it's a long shot, but keep an eye on DeBoer's name if they lose to Auburn. Now, if they don't, nothing's going to happen because Bama's going to gear up for the college football playoff. They'll play in that, and then, Penn State's not going to wait around for a long shot chance at that opportunity. But if they were to lose, and they would not make the playoff, by the way, no chance they make it at 9-3, then I think the noise in Tuscaloosa heats up, and maybe, just maybe, DeBoer, his agent, they just maybe an exit strategy makes more sense if that were to happen. And by the way, Auburn's been in a lot of close games this year. Who should Penn State hire as their head coach? Who would be an ideal fit to take over for James Franklin, who's gone and now at Virginia Tech, obviously? Let us know down in the comment section below. Now, Pete Nakos of On3 Sports today released an article talking about a lot of the head coach openings, and he kind of indicated that unless, it's tight-lipped among Penn State higher-ups, it doesn't seem like there's a clear direction right now in their coaching search, which could be a little worrisome. Here's what Nakos had to say. He says it's still unclear which direction the Nittany Lions are going in. James Madison head coach Bob Chesney has emerged as a name to watch in the search. The 48-year-old coach has won at every level of the sport. Athletic director Pat Kraft interviewed interim coach Terry Smith this week. Kraft has kept the search under wraps. Other names that have been tied to the opening include Georgia Tech's Brent Key and Vanderbilt's Clark Lee. At this point, there is no clear top target for the Nittany Lions, which you can either panic at that or maybe, there is something to like the legs of DeBoer. They're kind of waiting and seeing how that situation plays out, waiting and seeing if Alabama loses to see if they could potentially poach him. Who knows? Now, Bob Chesney is an interesting one because, everybody wants the next Curt Cignetti, right? Bob Chesney has coached at two colleges I'd never even heard of, Salve Regina and Assumption. Obviously won at both those stops. Holy Cross had a nice run and, taking over for Cignetti. He's kept the ball rolling. At James Madison, they have an outside shot to make the college football playoff this year, 19-5 in 2 seasons. Cignetti obviously proved he can make the jump from James Madison to the Big Ten. Can Bob Chesney? Well, regardless of what the answer is, yes or no, you got to keep a couple things in mind. One, Curt Cignetti had been coaching for a lot longer at JMU, whereas Chesney's only been there 2 years, and before that had never been at even a low-end Division I program. So that's number one. And number two, and I think this is where it's more important, it is one thing for Indiana to take that swing, right? Indiana has no football tradition. Let's bring in the JMU coach who's had a lot of success. He's a grinder. He can get us to a respectable level. No one saw Cignetti jumping into the Big Ten, making the playoff in year 1, and having a real shot at the national title in year 2. Not saying Chesney couldn't do it, but again, it's one thing for Indiana to do that. For Penn State to take that leap, that would be a pretty bold decision to fire James Franklin, who at minimum is an established top 20 college football head coach, and at maximum had you on the doorstep of a national championship last year, for Bob Chesney. Like, that's a pretty bold move if they end up going that route. Brent Key at Georgia Tech, I do think is an interesting name. I think he's done well there. Got the interim gig a few years ago, and this year in particular has them in the mix in the ACC. Tough loss last week. They're probably not going to make the college football playoff now, but he's a big believer in physicality, downhill run game, offensive line play. I think that all plays in the Big Ten. Now, you could argue if you're Penn State, should you look for more evolution, more high-powered passing attack? That's something Kalen DeBoer would provide, for example. I think Key's done pretty well with limited resources. Georgia Tech does not spend a lot, despite being in Atlanta, despite being, kind of in the heart of college football in this country. They're kind of a middle-of-the-pack ACC program. So what he's done there with Haynes King at quarterback has been pretty darn impressive. And then Clark Lee at Vandy, who James Franklin was at Vandy when they hired him, so there'd be some symmetry there. Took over a mess, took a few years. Last couple of years have obviously been much better, but you do wonder, 2-10, 5-7, 2-10, what's the common denominator last year and this year when Vandy's had their best 2-year stretch in a while? Diego Pavia. Is this a Pavia, kind of just drop in the sand, magical 2-year stretch, or is Clark Lee building something sustainable? I do think their teams are competitive. Their defense has gotten better, but if Diego Pavia is not their quarterback and just some average 50th best quarterback in the country is, I don't think they're 9-2 this year. So, can he continue can he keep finding quarterbacks at Vanderbilt? Vanderbilt's never going to invest like even a middle-of-the-pack SEC program. Now, he would have more resources at Penn State, certainly. So I'm not saying he couldn't be in the mix for the job, but I do think that is something to consider, like how much of this is just kind of the Pavia magic that Clark Lee is benefiting from. All right, more to discuss in Penn State's head coaching search, but do want to tell you guys about our awesome sponsor. That is PrizePicks. It is the holiday season, the best time of year for sports. Bowl games around the corner, basketball games are here, playoff pushes, it's all happening at once. And while you and I are out here making decisions every day, what gifts to buy, what food to eat, which game to watch, there is one place where it feels good to be right. That is PrizePicks. I don't know about you, but my season-long fantasy football team has been finished for weeks. That's why I like daily fantasy with PrizePicks, as I can play with different players all the time. Just pick 2 or more players and take more or less on their stat projections to qualify for a PrizePicks lineup. And if you hit, you win money. New feature alert, PrizePicks now has early payouts. If your lineup gets off to a hot start, you may now have the option to cash out those winnings before the game even finishes. I got a 3-player lineup this weekend. I took more than half a passing touchdown for Caleb Williams. That's a goblin play. Those are easier to hit. More than 46.5 receiving yards for Rome Odunze. Then I took less on Saquon Barkley's 74.5 rushing yards. That Eagles offensive line's been struggling a bit. So 3-player lineup right there. Check it out. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use our code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That is code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it is good to be right. Okay, what about Brian Daboll? There's been some rumors, some discussion around him as a possibility. His son was a student assistant at Penn State before he joined Daboll on the Giants staff. I think last year. He's considered a wild card candidate for the job. Pete Thamel had more on him as a possibility. He kind of echoed what Pete Nakos just reported, saying there's no obvious choice there for Penn State right now. He said, I even heard former Giants head coach Brian Daboll's got some support. He did a good job at Alabama. He was Nick Saban's offensive coordinator for 1 year, so a little bit of college experience there in fairly recent years. And this photo was taken either a day or 2 days after the Giants fired Daboll, and he was wearing a Penn State hoodie, which sparked some internet conversation. Now, I think he was just, going out for some coffee or something and wasn't going to wear some Giants gear, so he found a different hoodie. I wouldn't read too much into that. But I do think the common theme here with all of this is there's no clear top candidate right now, right? Like Virginia Tech, they were going all in on James Franklin, and they got him, right? And I think sometimes you can get in trouble when you go tunnel vision, but at the same time, the college football calendar, like you want to lock this thing in by first week of December. Ideally, signing day is like the 18th. You got the transfer portal after that. Brian Daboll's an interesting guy. I like that he's coached under Nick Saban. I like that he's been in college football at least a little bit. And he's been a head coach in the NFL. And while it didn't end well, he did have some success. I think he would bring a fun offensive brand of football to that university. That's been something that's lacking for a long time. So I wouldn't completely dismiss him. And then what about Terry Smith, who Nakos mentioned as well? He's gotten a lot of internal support from his players, some fan support as well. You saw after they crushed Nebraska the other night, a lot of the players had these "Hire Terry Smith" signs, which you'll kind of see here as we cycle through some photos. Terry Smith was asked about the fans were chanting Terry, Terry, and then the players holding the sign, so on and so forth. And, he kind of bluntly said, that's my locker room. Like, he clearly wants the job. He seems like a player's coach, an easy guy to root for, brings kind of a calmness yet serious manner at the same time with his demeanor on the sideline. The problem is, he's 56 years old. He's never been a head coach. He's 56. So the interim route already is pretty risky historically, especially in the NFL. This is college. There's been some success stories. Brent Key's done well at Georgia Tech. Dabo Swinney, once upon a time, was Clemson's interim. That obviously has worked out. So there are examples. There is precedence to where it has paid off well. Typically, I'm not a fan of that route. The difference with like a Dabo and a Brent Key, they were young guys getting that chance, right? You go the interim route here with the 56-year-old and it doesn't work out, I mean, you've kind of wasted a few years, right? So I always say this, don't make a decision primarily out of emotion. Obviously, almost every decision in life that you make, there's some level of emotion. It's going to be on the pie chart. I just bought a house recently. Some level of emotion, but logic has to play a big role here. Terry Smith could be a great coach. He could be fired in 2 years. Like, it's pretty risky. So I think it's smart to interview him, but you don't hire a guy because the players want him. Like, that's just not what you do. Like, yeah, let the players voice their opinions. They're totally entitled. I like the fact that they've rallied around this guy. They should be Indiana. They crushed Nebraska. Like, they've figured things out. They've kind of steadied the ship here after a disastrous start to the season. But, again, it's like you see this all the time. They rally around Antonio Pierce with the Raiders. It's a disaster, right? So I would say more often than not, the interim head coach turned to permanent head coach thing does not work. And you're Penn State. Like, you should be able to get a high-level, candidate with more skins on the wall, more kind of resume to build upon. And, like, if you're going to go with the first-time head coach, I'd rather go with an up-and-comer, not a 56-year-old. So doesn't mean he shouldn't be in the mix. I think he'd be a guy, whoever gets the job, you would want to keep on staff if he's willing to stay. But I think this would be pretty risky if they went this route. Should Terry Smith get the job? Type Y for yes, type in for no. I'd say probably not. At the same time, doesn't feel like there's a clear, obvious candidate right now. And that's still with LSU and Florida waiting on Lane Kiffin potentially. Ole Miss would open up in that situation if he left. Auburn's still out there. Sounds like John Sumrall is probably going to be their guy, but Arkansas as well. A lot of jobs open, not a lot of jobs filled. That's why you give Virginia Tech a lot of credit for just saying, hey, Franklin's our guy, and we're going to make him an offer he can't refuse. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of For Verts. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. This show's also on Chat Sports, so wherever you're watching, hit that subscribe button. We will continue to cover this college football coaching carousel.